Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the CommQuest Hope Discovered podcast. My name is Bill. Hope Discovered is a podcast series from CommQuest Services. This podcast features individuals in recovery from addiction and mental illness, recovery service professionals, and community advocates who offer insight on how we provide hope to the communities we serve. We have a professional today with us. We have our Psychiatric Medical Director for CommQuest Services, Dr. Iyoha. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Bill. Great to see you.
Great to have you. A lot of times people will use the term psych services, and of course, this is short for psychiatric services, and that can mean a lot of things. So one of the things we wanted to talk about on today's program, the focus of our program, is the scope of our psychiatric services. So when somebody says CommQuest Psychiatric Services, what exactly does that encompass?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I'm sure that it's really across the board. I think it's probably an area that can confuse a lot of folks. Psychiatric services really is a slice in the big pie of all the things that we do at CommQuest. And of course, our services range from social support. So there's a whole bunch of programs that are associated with providing social services. We also have recovery services. And within that umbrella, there are all these programs that really speak to recovery services that we provide. And then you've got mental health services, and that could be just case management, that's counseling, that's supported employment, school-based mental health services. And then there's psychiatric services. So we're a slice within a bigger pie, of services that we provide to the community. And psychiatric services really, our goal in what we do is to care for folks who are suffering from mental health disorders. Okay, well, how is that different from mental health concerns? Well, we all experience mental health concerns. We have days where we're sad. We have days where we may be in some level of crises. It's truly on a continuum. And it just as we see with any medical condition, okay, because psychiatric conditions are medical conditions. So just like we see with any medical condition, we call something a disorder when it meets a certain criteria. And for psychiatric disorders, we have to see two things, okay? Symptoms that are severely distressful, okay? And different disorders have different criteria. But the second thing is severe impairment to our functionality. And so when individuals reach a level in their mental health concerns, when they become so severe that there's functional impairment and the person is severely distressed by them, that's where we come in. That's where the service for psychiatric services, that's where we make our mark. And at that juncture, we look at interventions that are a bit more aggressive in targeting one's ailments. And so generally speaking, it tends to be medications. So oral medications, sometimes intramuscular or injectable medications. And then we have other more aggressive therapies, should we need to go that route. But that kind of encompasses, I would say, really the majority of what you see. But that's not all we do. We also provide targeted psychotherapy. And again, but our mainstay, the goal of psychiatric services, again, within this entire pie of services, is to alleviate the disorders that individuals face with regards to psychiatric disorders. Yeah.
Okay. As we implement these services, when a client comes in for care, what should their expectations be in terms of what kind of provider they are going to be dealing with? Sure.
That's an excellent question. It's one that I think is being answered nationally. And I want to provide a little bit of background because we are in a time, as we all know, where the needs of our community members who are suffering from mental health concerns has increased substantially. And the number of providers, specifically psychiatric providers, so psychiatrists, okay, individuals who have a specific medical training, the number is very low. We don't have enough psychiatrists to meet the needs of our national community, okay? And so we are fortunate in this country that when there is a need, we figure out a way to meet that need. And we're fortunate that we have mental health professionals who have advanced training in psychiatry and are able to provide services, psychiatric services, alongside psychiatrists. So your physician extenders, your nurse practitioners, your physician assistants, okay, to name two, that are able to provide psychiatric services. So a community member who is suffering from a mental health disorder may come in for services. They may see a psychiatrist. They may see a nurse practitioner. They may see a physician assistant. At CommQuest, we make sure that in addition to seeing any of these providers, I, as the medical director, am closely embedded in the care. I collaborate very closely with all of our providers, and we work together to provide care for our patients. And if a situation or if a patient is needing specific type of care, they may see me. Okay, but we are so fortunate that we have an array of providers in this field that can meet the needs of our community. And so that's what a person may expect if they need services.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions, certainly, and in fact, I would say stigmas in regard to a medication for treatment.
Sure.
One of the fears or trepidations of medications are the side effects. A lot of people put off seeking treatment because, quote unquote, this is the stigmatized verbiage here. Someone will say, I don't want to get zombied out. I don't want to become a different person. I don't want to get numbed. Those are some of the fears that people have. Can you address medicated treatment? And I'm going to presume you're aware of some of these fears, and how do you address the concerns of side effects?
Yeah, absolutely. With any medication in any field of medicine, we are concerned about side effects. The reason it becomes so much more poignant of a discussion with psychiatric medication is that our personalities and our mental health symptoms, they're enmeshed. And so the very thing we're using to treat the symptoms that are distressing us, that are causing functional impairment, can sometimes have an impact on what we feel is, again, a part of our personality. And so the goal of being on these medications is not to be a zombie. And you can talk to the millions of individuals who are functioning in the community. They're working, they're thriving, they're taking care of loved ones, and they're on psychiatric medication. We don't know it because they're doing well. Okay. And so when you're under good care, you discuss the potential side effects. You start with really low dose and you work your way up. The most important thing is to make sure a person is tolerating medication. And so that is something that we put a lot of emphasis on within psychiatric services for any medication we put a patient on. You should not feel like a zombie. If you feel like a zombie, you're on the wrong medication. That's not the goal of psychiatric medication. Okay. And so that's really, it's an unfortunate stigma that's there, but it's something that we have seen in the past. We've seen where folks, they were on a medication. Maybe the provider client relationship was not such that the client felt comfortable to say, hey, this is how the medication is making me feel. Because if a provider knows, we're going to make some adjustments. But we haven't always seen that in our history of psychiatry. But that time is gone. We are talking about the things that are really barriers to folks getting on medication and staying on them. And so, it absolutely is a misconception. Can we see it? Sure. You give too much of a medication or someone's on the wrong medication, we can see that. But that's never the goal. And we have millions of people that are on medication, psychiatric medications across the nation that would say otherwise. So.
Yes. Very good. I know that's I've heard it said, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that's practically no medication that doesn't have some sort of a side effect. But that's something that you, as a professional, when you're dealing with a person, you gauge their needs, what their reaction is going to be, and
Absolutely.
you move on from there.
That is why a person should be under psychiatric care when they are uh, or they are afflicted with a mental health disorder. You may see sometimes where a person starts a medication, then they don't see the provider for
Mm.
months on end. No, you should be under care, because if you are to experience any type of effect that was not expected, then we have to do something differently, and we always do. We do.
Yes. In the common vernacular, I will call it, of society, in regard to stigma, a lot of times medication for psychiatric needs are referred to in a disparaging way. For example, somebody's acting up, they're getting mad or they're getting upset. They'll say, "Well, I guess somebody forgot to take their meds this morning," and it seems like a funny thing on the one hand, but it feeds into the stigma of what a lot of people call crazy meds. Of course, that's not a term we would ever use, but that's what gets said.
Mhm.
And that stigma, here again, really prevents people from seeking help because they don't want to be one of these types of individuals who needs those types of medications. How does this concept harm medical treatment for mental disorders? And what would you say to address that? When you hear those things being said, what goes through your mind?
Oh, I cringe.
Mm.
I cringe every time I have a patient that walks into an office and they tell me about 20 plus years of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Then they say, but I don't want to be on any medication. I don't want, that stuff, that's for the crazy. And then I can tell you, if I fast forward to when a patient is on medication that helps them and they're living their life, and they go back and they say, how did I live the last 10, 15, 20 years without treatment of my medical condition? The
Yes.
reason that verbiage is it's so harmful is because it treats, again, it goes back to the difficulty of what we are faced with in psychiatry, is that our symptoms are enmeshed with personality.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is this taking on of one's symptoms as though that's who they are, or though that's who I am. But these are is separate. They're very separate.
Mm-hmm.
A person who's on. So one of the things that I try to do, that we try to make really a priority when it comes to providing care, is to really normalize the fact that we all struggle with mental health concerns. It's on a continuum, but
Yes.
there's no human being immune to mental health concerns
Sure.
unless they're not human. But if you're
Right.
human, okay. The question is, when does it become a disorder and we have to do something about it so you're not suffering?
Yes.
So, again, I think, although that stigma and that feeling, that misconception, it still exists. Truly, I think that we've continued to see a change in that viewpoint, because we see that we're all affected. We've got loved ones affected at one point or another in our life, depending on what's going on. We ourselves may have been affected. And so we see a normalizing of the human condition. And when someone is afflicted and they get treatment, we have also become much more okay with talking about it, so that people can see the other side of it. If only people could see that the folks that I've taken care of, they provide, they are in healthcare, they're in business, they're in law. These individuals are thriving in our community, but no one has ever known that they were afflicted with a severe mood disorder or a thought disorder. And we're now in a time where we do discuss it. And so we're going to say, oh, this this person who I respect so much, they got crazy meds. No, this
Mm-hmm.
still has a disorder and
Yes.
well managed with medication. No different
Absolutely.
than any other medical condition. So I think we'll continue to see these type of misconceptions fall by the wayside. And when people do make those comments, I think there's more of us that are looking at them like, why would you say that?
Yes.
Like, what
Yeah.
does that mean?
Yeah. I would say this to anyone needing any type of medical care that they may be a little reluctant to engage in because they're afraid they're never going to get off of it, or they're the fact of the matter is you let all these things make you resist getting treatment, but after you finally make that step, so often you say to yourself, why did I wait so long?
That's what yep,
Yeah, over nothing. Over nothing. And yeah, thyroid medication, I wasn't too thrilled about having to take a pill every day, but you feel better.
it's better. And I can't tell you, I think if there's one sentiment that I, over the years, see more than anything in my patients whose conditions are in remission, who are well managed on medication. I can't even tell you the number of them. I mean, the vast majority of them. Why didn't I do this sooner? Why did I suffer for so long? Why did I lose so many jobs because of this?
Yes.
Why did I have so many strange relationships thinking that there was something wrong with me? Whereas in fact, I have a disorder where I couldn't control some of these symptoms that I experienced. Why did I, and then it becomes a conversation of us forgiving ourselves and being gentle with ourselves, with the fact that we're human beings and we are all, impacted by what people say and what people might think. And so a lot of times after a patient is doing really well on medication, it then becomes a conversation of, okay, well, let's be gentle with ourselves. I know you're feeling great now. Think that the world is your oyster now. Let's not beat ourselves up for the last 10 years. Thankfully,
Yeah.
we're here and you're doing well, and let's move it forward. So that becomes more of the conversation. But I truly, I implore folks, the most important piece uh, of considering reaching out for help is really knowing that there's something better on the other side. And I wish there was a way for me to, without violating HIPAA regulations, to just showcase the folks who are doing so
Yes.
well.
Yes. Can't be stated enough. Sometimes that first step, it's not as bad as you feel it's going to be. In regard to CommQuest Services, some of our programs, we are undergoing some changes and updates, such as in-person requirements for medication refills. The second part of that kind of question, or component to that question, would be, of course, we are doing it because it makes client care so much better. But a
Absolutely.
lot of times, in the talk out in the parking lot between clients waiting to go in or whatever, why are they doing this? It's such a hassle. But there is a reason for them. So I guess my question would be, what changes are coming to some of our programs, and what is behind them? What is the reason we are doing them?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll speak briefly to some of the general things that we are improving upon within psychiatric services, but it's all patient client centered. It's all geared to improving the client experience, improving client care, as well as ensuring client safety. That's of top importance with the medications that we prescribe. I won't go into all of, we are standardizing and improving, at the clinician level. So our providers that provide care, making sure that all of our clinical tools are robust, that they're able and ready to see and take care of patients with the most severe of symptoms. Making sure that our clinical processes, so when patients are coming in for appointments, that across the organization, that is standardized no matter what location you're being seen at, that those processes look similar. But then really the one I think has gotten the most question, and I would definitely want to touch upon, is that some of the requirements for coming into the office for care, which is not for all medications, but for certain medications that are highly regulated and regulated for good reason, but they require more frequent monitoring. All that we are doing, quite frankly, is ensuring that the clinical care that we provide is consistent with what we're seeing around the nation. Um, we've seen the epidemics that have occurred when medications are treated flagrantly.
Mhm.
We've all seen it. We've seen the fallout from it. And so we are, as a medical community, being very mindful to look at all of the different types of medications that we provide and ensure that if there are medications that have certain risk associated with them, that we are recognizing that importance and treating it accordingly. And so it is not at all to penalize clients. If in fact, it is to ensure their safety. It is to ensure that we are doing our due diligence as their providers in monitoring the medications, how they are functioning on them, and what is happening with medications when they leave the office. So I feel for clients because I know that it has been a bit of a paradigm shift, and it definitely it's taken adjustment. But it is lock and step with what we are seeing across the nation to ensure that we are not in another type of epidemic that is, directly related to medications.
Yes.
It would be the worst thing for us to see. And so, and even with that, we are trying to find ways as we're moving forward in some of these changes, ensuring that we can find some creative ways where maybe not all patients are having to come into the office for this. Maybe we are able to continue some sort of telehealth. Again, we're in the era where folks can be seen and be taken care of even in the comfort of their home. Well, how can we do that in a safe way, in a way that allows us to still maintain due diligence with really, medications that truly require appropriate monitoring? And so we are working on some creative ways to do that. But make no mistake, these changes are in no way to penalize patients. It is to ensure that the long-term care that they receive is appropriate, and it will be to their benefit, quite frankly.
Yes, and I would just as a layman, I would only add to that that's very in step with cholesterol medication, high blood pressure medication. You just don't want to endlessly refill these things without knowing whether or not that patient needs have changed. They might, they might need to be strengthened or backed off or what have you. And this is all a way of keeping tabs on making sure that they're getting the right treatment. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. We would be doing clients a disservice to just send you off with a pill and a several refills saying, see you back in see you in 4 months. You know, um,
Yes.
there are reasons that we do this, and it is to folks' benefit. So yes, that is true.
Very good. We always try to end with a message of hope. And I know you have an issue with the word crisis,
Um,
but I'm going to say it because that's what people say, especially in these political times.
sure,
Everybody's out there saying we have a mental health crisis.
sure.
Yes, and not only in local communities, but nationwide, there most certainly is a situation that needs addressed. I'll put it that way. But I'll let you explain it. What message of hope would you have for people who hear this type of jargon and they feel overwhelmed by the issues impacting mental wellness in our communities?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we hear this term. So it's a mental health crisis. We are in a mental health crisis. You know, it would be a crisis if we weren't addressing it. There was
Hmm.
a time where the mental health concerns of our communities went not unnoticed, but undiscussed,
Hmm.
swept under the rug. And then things changed, ears open. Folks started to experience or had firsthand experience with much of what many community members had been suffering all along. And what did we do at the federal, at the state, at the local level? Support poured in. The private sector, folks talked about what they were going through. And there's not been a time greater than now, where we see the type of support for folks being able to get mental health services than any other time before. And so when I hear there's a mental health crisis, no, 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 no. There have been mental health solutions. We are at this is the rate at which we are having folks enter the profession to provide care for folks who are afflicted with mental health disorders. Could it be greater than now? You see that there are support, whether we're talking about financially, whether we're talking about social media platforms, we're talking about the private sector. of individuals, of communities, of community leaders pouring support to ensure that we can provide care for those afflicted with mental health disorders. There's never been a time like this. So we have been in a crisis. Folks have been suffering for a really long time, but I have not seen a time like this where we see individuals getting care. I've not seen a time like this where, until now, where you see individuals emboldened and empowered to say, yeah, I've been struggling with this and I do need help. My family
Yeah.
member needs help. My husband has been suffering this and our entire family has dealt with the residual impact of it. We want to collectively get help. Oh my goodness,
Yes.
it's happening.
Yes.
What could be greater than that?
I feel that's a great message. That's an angle that I don't hear very often. So appreciative of that. Here again, as a layman, I've noticed, for example, there's much more sensitivity in common discussion now for conditions like depression. It used to be when somebody mentioned depression, someone would say, "Well, what are you depressed about?" And now people are starting to understand this isn't a mood. It's something that needs addressed, and it's people actually encourage you. Well, have you talked to someone? Have you done this and that? And that is so helpful to people who do need that type of encouragement. So I'm so glad that those conversations are getting better.
And Bill, and do you know why that was the case? During the time where we have really been at the pinnacle, or I say the climax of the crisis that you sort of mentioned, I don't think there's any American that was untouched by mental health disorders. We either had
Hmm.
loved ones, we experienced it ourselves, colleagues, friends. We have all been impacted in some way or another by mental health issues. And so we all learned that if we don't get this right, if we can't help our neighbors, our classmates, our teammates,
Hmm.
we may be
Yes,
one person away from losing someone.
absolutely. Yes.
So we all have learned that, and again, it caused an outcry, and our leaders heard, and you see the emphasis being made on it today. And so there has not been a time greater than this to get the help you need.
Yes.
And
Totally. Yes, that's such an important message because I know a lot of times people focus on getting back to the term crisis. We focus on the problems. We say, "Oh, we still got to do this," but we don't recognize the progress. Just since I've been with the agency, I've seen a dramatic change in social interactions and all that with how people regard mental health. There's a lot to feel really good about. We've been talking to Dr. Iyoha. She is the Psychiatric Medical Director for CommQuest Services. Doctor, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. It's always great to talk to you. First of all, you're a healer. You have that energy. It comes across. It's always great to talk to you just for that reason. But I always learn so much. And you've given that knowledge to some of our listeners, and we really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here.
Bill, thank you so much for having me. It's always an honor to speak and talk with you. So thank you.
Well, thank you. For those wanting more information about what we do here at CommQuest, I would direct you to CommQuest.org. That's CommQuest.org. Thank you very much for listening to the CommQuest Hope Discovered podcast, and we will talk to you again very, very soon.